Here with us to do that are the entrepreneur, Kate Hardcastle, and the political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Nigel Nelson. Nigel, Kate, thank you very much for staying with us. All right, let's start off with you, Kate. You've pulled out this story from the Times. We're reporting it as well about Sir Gavin Williamson, allegations of bullying and now pressure on the Prime Minister. Talk to us about this.
Yes, Sir Gavin Williamson, it kind of is one of those things that kind of questions in your brain, doesn't it, when we think about that career history. But going to the horrid story itself, this is a bit of a nightmare, perhaps, for our new PM. He appointed Sir Williamson to his cabinet, and it's believed that he did so despite knowing the fact there were bullying claims going against him. Now, when you go into the story, this is about Williamson's text to an MP, Wendy Morton, who was serving Liz Truss at the time, and it seems the whole debacle's over the Queen's funeral, and his attendant, he seems to have got quite hot under the collar. If you read into the speech bubbles in the document that tell you all of the quite threatening texts between him and Miss Morton on WhatsApp in terms of his attendance. He wanted to be there, and things like, there's a price for everything is some of the wording that's used, which seems, as the statement says, threatening. I think there's a few things going on here. We were promised from our Prime Minister that we would have a cabinet of integrity, a government of integrity. That surely can't be the case if you are appointing someone that has got any whiff of challenge or scandal around them. Is this appropriate at all to be happening anyway? We were in national mourning, and it just seems to be that someone's got a bit of an ego trip in terms of wanting to be there rather than understanding the respect of the scenario. But in any workplace, there should be no language used like this, or bullying texts or threats. Indeed, it's just absolutely concerning. But as I go back to the beginning, this is Sir Gavin Williamson, someone who was given a knighthood. We believe for his services to politics, when, if you look into what happened, be it his sacking from his position of Defence Secretary through to his challenges as Education Secretary, a lot of people still scratching their head over that to start with. So was that even the right move for the Prime Minister to appoint him before this scandal came out?
Yeah, that question needs to be answered, I guess, by Rishi Sunak. Nigel, you will have seen, of course, the reporting around this, as Kate was mentioning. The texts are really something to behold, and as Kate says, they are quite aggressive. But the interesting other element to this is that, of course, some latest lines by Sir Jake Berry revealing that Rishi Sunak knew about this before he appointed Sir Gavin.
Yeah, that's probably the most worrying thing, that if that is true and Rishi Sunak knew, he shouldn't have gone ahead and appointed him. That, as Kate just said, Rishi Sunak talked about integrity in government, and then he appoints two cabinet ministers who have been fired, Suella Braverman being the other one. Now, the Lib Dems were the first out of the block to call for Gavin Williamson to resign. That was Daisy Cooper, the deputy leader. Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the Labour Party, has said, look, he shouldn't have been appointed in the first place. And I'd have thought if the investigation by Conservative HQ finds Gavin Williamson guilty of bullying and harassment, then he probably will have to go.
Yeah, and Sophie Ridge on Sunday is going to have plenty more on this at 8:30 when she's speaking to Oliver Dowden, former chair of the party, and of course now the Duchy, head of the Duchy of Lancaster. All right, Nigel, let's stay with you, because a story here inside The Observer about the Home Office being on a recruitment drive.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary story, and these are asylum assessors. And what the Observer says is going on is that the Home Office is so desperate to find people, they're turning to sort of sales staff at McDonald's, Tesco, Aldi. Then they give them a couple of days training when they're meant to have 2 weeks, and they go on to then assess asylum seekers whether they have a right to actually stay in Britain. Now, these are life and death decisions, and according to the Observer, who've been talking to a whistleblower, that these staff are even looking up on Lonely Planet to see what kind of countries these people come from, and obviously, if they were returned, what kind of risk they would face. I have to say that the Home Office actually heavily denies that this is happening. But if it is, then we are not treating asylum seekers with the humanity and compassion we ought to be. People who shouldn't be in this country, of course, should be removed, but the process ought to be done a lot more gently, and certainly not in a rush, which is what seems to be happening in this case.
Okay, quick thought from you on that then. I mean, the Home Office, as Nigel says, denied the story, but I guess this speaks to the idea that the processes have to be sped up, don't they, which will stop situations developing like they have at Manston.
I think short-term measures need to be completely reviewed, and indeed longer-term measures. I think we've got an immediate issue that needs resolving, but we have to remember this isn't just about statistics. This is a very human issue, and it needs to be dealt with humane quality. I mean, it's just shocking to hear that this potentially could even be a realistic situation.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks for that. Let's stay with you now, because we're going to go to a story in the Telegraph now. This is about ambulances. Tell us the reporting on this.
I was with some members of the NHS or ex-nurses last night talking about this very story and how harrowing it can be, and also hearing reports from the families that have been affected, which is our ambulance services have seen huge delays, some reporting up to 2 days late. Now, that is quite an extreme, but even the pickup for 999 calls has been challenged massively since 5 years ago, when the last figure said, you might be looking at up to an hour for a 999 call to be picked up in some places. I think when we've got heart attacks, stroke victims, where we know it's all about the immediacy of care, and those families are having to support those poor patients, those sufferers, not being able to get the care and support that they need, not even being able to get through to the ambulance services as quickly as they need for a response, or maybe to be talked through some care. It's so concerning. Complete review needed of the situation. Labour have called this situation terrifying. We also then have this situation that follows on from this, and that we seem to have a gridlock, and that we don't have people being released from hospitals quickly enough because there's not enough support and care at the other side of this. It doesn't matter which way you look at it. The staff working within it, the people who are faced needing the care, everyone is suffering because of this, and it needs urgent resolve. And it's one of those many scenarios RPM should be focused on, perhaps not dealing with cabinet members faced with bullying allegations.
Okay, thanks for that. Nigel, I won't get you to comment on that, because I do want to move on to the next story that you've picked out. This is a story inside the Express. This is about drivers and speeds, and just tell us about how the reporting sort of lays out that we should perhaps be driving a bit faster.
That's right, yes. I mean, we all know that speed kills, but according to the Express, so does driving too slowly. So they've got figures which show that 1,000 people have been injured and 3 killed by slow drivers. This happens because frustrated motorists who are stuck behind them then try and overtake, and of course end up in a head-on collision. Now, you can be fined for this. You can be prosecuted for careless driving, which would be 3 points on your license. But I guess the message here has got to be, both to speeders and to slow coaches, is to stick to the speed limit.
Yeah, and I thought from you, Kat, I saw you nodding along when we brought this up. I mean, I quite like that 20-mile-an-hour speed limit when I got my little boy in the back, but I know it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, do you not think there should be kind of some review? I don't know if I'm being too daring saying this, where we have to reset our test, or at least go back and have our skills checked at some point, Nigel. What do you think?
Nigel?
I think that's probably a good idea. That we should all take some kind of test again. And I've been driving for I don't know how many decades, and probably it wouldn't be a bad idea to refresh.
And Kate, I mean, I'll concur with you guys on that. But when would that test be done, do you think, Kate? At which stage in your license holding?
I'm thinking probably around now. I'm really putting myself up to it, aren't I? I've got to learn how to put a caravan on the back of the car, and I'm a bit nervous about that. But apparently I don't need a test for it. I think I should be put under a test. I think that just changed last year. So it would do no harm, would it? I mean, it'd be a bit of revenue. I appreciate that everyone's probably looking at the screen and hates me right now, but might sharpen up our skills, might not be as, I don't know, lazy in our driving as we might be, perhaps.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with a bit more road safety. All right, Kate, Nigel, lovely speaking to you this morning. Thank you. Have a great Sunday. All right, well, there is, of course, plenty more to come here on Sky News Breakfast, including more, of course, on the pressure facing the Prime Minister to sack Sir Gavin Williamson, who is now facing an investigation into bullying. And it turns out the Prime Minister knew that before he appointed him.